Welcome to The Growth Shift, the podcast where we unlock the psychological and strategic blueprints of predictable growth. If you've built a successful business, you know the truth. Your expertise is high value, but your time is finite. The question is, how do you sustain that success without sacrificing your most valuable asset? We believe that the next level of success requires a strategic pivot, a fundamental shift that moves beyond the old ways. In every episode, we dive into the critical turning points of industry leaders and uncover how they're leveraging AI not as a shortcut, but as the strategic force for their next growth shift. Today, we dive in with a leader who is defining the future of their industry. This episode is brought to you by Valentix, your strategic growth partner. At Valentix, we believe that trust and authentic relationships are the only true currency in high-value business. We challenge the status quo by building an AI-powered client acquisition engine that enhances your human connection, helping you move beyond the slow growth of referrals. Our AI-powered systems eliminate the grind, allowing you to break through the noise, build high-value relationships, and free up your time to focus on transformative client impact. If you're ready to build a predictable growth engine, learn more at valentix.io. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today on The Growth Shift, we're joined by Swafia Ames, the Managing Director of Brighter Strategies. Swafia's career is a compelling journey rooted in a deep passion for people within organizations, spanning from traditional corporate roles to law firms to now leading a full-service organizational development consultancy. Driven by a desire to work with purpose-driven organizations and prove that one can both help people and make money, Swafia and her small and mighty team empower clients by aligning people, processes, and systems. Her insights into change management, culture transformation, and leveraging technology to maintain human connection offer a powerful blueprint for leaders navigating today's complex organizational landscape. Swafia, welcome to The Growth Shift.
Thank you, David. Happy to be here.
Excited to have you on the show today. Took a little while to get you on. I was sick and then you were sick, but this conversation is going to be great. Now, Swafia, your journey began as many people do, right? Traditional corporate roles, law firms, but underlying it all was a drive and a passion for people within the organizations. Tell us a little bit more about your foundational journey and really what led you to where you are now with Brighter Strategies.
Yeah, thank you, David. You're taking me down memory lane a little bit, but I started in undergrad as a psychology major. I knew I wanted to work with people. I was fascinated by human behavior and the dynamics in human behavior, and landed in the business psychology space and looking at people function within business context. So came out of that with a very traditional human resources, intern, foundational role of really understanding the dynamics of, as I like to say, you need people to work in your organization, to execute your mission, to execute your goals. What does that look like? And moving beyond really that transactional side of human resources where it's, the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, everyone's getting paid, we're all compliant, into really transforming how individuals work within an ecosystem. What are my goals? What are my objectives? What is the purpose of this organization? How am I making a difference? How do I grow and develop my career within this ecosystem of an organization? So that's kind of the 50,000 foot view of sort of where I started in terms of really just sort of trying to understand how people fit, how we get them motivated and engaged and excited and feeling good and showing up and doing their best in organizations. And then as I sort of navigated my career journey, I moved into what I would describe more systems spaces. So started off, like I said, very transactional HR, I's dotted, T's crossed, nobody's getting sued. Really started looking at how do we attract talent? So looking at recruitment systems, looking at not only once we get people in and align with our employer brand or brand identity, how do we get them integrated? So recruiting, onboarding, and then how do we, develop them, developing that talent, moved into the professional development space. And so my career just continued to grow and evolve as I progressed along my career journey.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a little bit about sort of how I started, how I got into really sort of integrating the people passion process into how I function as a professional.
Yeah, so integrating the people, the passion, the process. Something you mentioned is that a lot of it sounds like a lot of HR roles and departments are primarily focused on dotting I's and crossing T's, right? Making sure, of course, the organization doesn't do anything wrong, nobody gets
Yeah,
sued, and everything is aligned there.
yeah.
I'm curious, right? With your understanding of human psychology and the path that you've taken, your recognition of the fact that, there needs to be more purpose behind it as well. Why do you think it is that perhaps many HR teams and departments maybe get stuck or put too much focus on dotting the I's and crossing the T's instead of focusing on that human-centric organizational personal development side that can really impact the company so much more?
Yeah, this is a great question, and this really sort of speaks to David that the way my career shifted, why I moved sort of out of that very transactional space into the more systems change space. You can get bogged down, especially the size of your organization. Keeping those I's dotted and T's crossed with the changing landscape of local, especially in America, local and state legislation. It's a full-time gig. There is a lot happening, and you can almost sort of lose sight of that real human piece of human resources, where
Yeah.
you've got to focus on the people. That there's so many other aspects. As humans, we all have different stories, identities, experiences that influence how we show up in the workplace. We're all motivated differently and inspired differently. We all have different skill sets and experiences that make up how we show up in the workplace. And so if you're not intentional, which is a word that I use a lot, about how you are crafting and constructing your people strategy, right? So it's a full form strategy. You need that transactional piece. You need to make sure you're in compliance, but you also need to focus on the human. You need to focus on the culture. You need to focus on leadership. You need to focus on
Mm.
nurturing and developing talent, the care and feeding of your workforce. So you've got to sort of have a bit of a bifurcated approach, but that's also aligned and
Mm.
synergistic. And so that requires a lot of intention. But again, depending on the size of your organization, depending on, frankly, who's leading your people strategy function, if you're not bringing that sort of unified lens, then you can get lost in the minutia day to day, which is absolutely essential, though.
Yeah,
Not going to knock it.
change requires intentionality, right? And if you're
Oh,
not intentional about positive change, then you're inadvertently being intentional about not focusing on change, right? Which can lead you in the other direction. But it sounds like maybe, one of the biggest challenges that HR departments and professionals fall into is they're being intentional about dotting the I's and crossing the T's, but losing the focus on the intentional focus on individuals as well.
yeah, it can happen. I mean, and when you think about a day in a life, I always say I'm going to write a book. You've probably from your own career journey have some stories that you're like, wow, I can't believe my colleague did that, or wow, this happened in the workplace. Imagine that on like 10,000. As HR leaders, as HR professionals, anybody that's working in the people space where you're dealing with people in the workplace, we've seen it all, we've heard it all. I heard a story recently. I'm like, no, no, that didn't really happen. Come on, seriously, it's 2026. People are still doing that. There are so many sort of random one-off things that you think should not be happening because we should know better by now after, over 100 years of, HR and, business psychology research. Like we should all know better, right? But those things really do happen. And so you can get sort of lost in some of the day to day things that happen. But again, I think this is where having a very dynamic vision around people strategy, a dynamic vision around culture, a dynamic vision around growth, and how the growth of the organization is aligned with the growth of the talent within the organization. And so again, that word intentionality comes back up, creating those intentional systems and processes. And I'm so excited to work with clients that have that focus, that know, hey, we may not have this resource in-house. We know we need it. We know we need a system. And so partnering with an organization like mine or other consultants leading in this space is really where I think the change happens and the rubber meets the road, because you need it. Like I know I might need a technology. I'm not a coder by any chance in my dreams, but I know that there are resources out there available to me, so I will tap into them. But
Mm.
we're back to that word intentionality again,
Yeah.
making sure that you are seeing what you need and going after it and finding the resources to help you integrate it into your organization.
Definitely, definitely. So you started your career journey in a typical HR role and with a lot of intentionality and pursuit of purpose, right? You developed and learned about people and systems and processes, and now you're the managing director of Brighter Strategies. You've learned a lot in your journey. There's definitely been a lot of shifts and growth that have occurred and have happened. But when we look at that main growth shift moment, the most impactful one that allowed you to perhaps see business differently, what do you recall? What was that most impactful moment?
I love this question. So for me, the shift for me, I was in my one of my law firm roles. The role was global, so I was working across our 20 some odd offices, really trying to create inclusive and equitable programs and systems that aligned with all of the work that the firm was trying to achieve as a growing entity. And what I kept running into was I was having like great success in the Paris office. I had a very committed team and things were changing and we were creating systemic change. And in Atlanta, things were going really well and we had great systems and processes. I was really struggling with the ability to create that change sustainable across all of our 20 offices. And what I realized is that a lot of the work I was doing was really linked to a team or a person. So like David's really dynamic and he gets it and he's working really hard, you know, in our Paris office to create this change. And then David wins the lottery and David leaves the Paris office and all of that work just goes good. Like David's gone. No, we don't know why he was doing it. So the shift for me, and I would say the growth shift for me, and really sort of creating systemic change holistically that is sustainable across organizations really came with that. How do I create change that is just not linked to one person or one office or one event or activity? And so that was my sort of question to myself. And so pursuing my graduate studies in industrial and organizational psychology really helped me develop more tools in my toolkit to really create systemic change, to think about organizations and systems, and to really rely on the models and theories and data that historians before me have created and tested and implemented to do the work that I'm doing today. So
Mm.
that was my big pivot in terms of sort of my professional journey and my approach to the work that I'm doing today in terms of not just creating a one-off moment for this one, person or department, but really sort of how do we create holistic change within the organization that creates agency and ownership for first and foremost the leaders and leadership commitment and their role in creating change and transformation organizations. Talk a lot about that. But really, how do we create sustainable change that that allows the entire organization to thrive and the people within the organization to grow and thrive as well?
So systemic, holistic, and sustainable change. It's a big focus of what you're doing at Brighter Strategies today.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit more about the hands-on, your day-to-day, when you're actually working with your clients, right? Full service organizational development. What does this mean when you're coming in? Can you perhaps give us not an example, but just explain to us really what that day-to-day looks like, the hands-on.
Absolutely. I mean, the key word is collaboration. And one of the first things I say, even when we're doing a pitch, when we do our launch call, you sign the contract, we're doing a pitch call, a sort of like planning call for the kickoff of the project, we have to work collaboratively. The one thing I say is, listen, I know what I know. I've worked with a bunch of different organizations, but maybe I haven't worked for y'all yet, right? You know a lot about this organization that is helpful to me and my team as we try to develop a relevant and impactful intervention for y'all. So typically that day to day really involves a core project team so that the work is not being done in a vacuum and that along the journey we have regular touch points, really checking in, validating the data that we're collecting, getting clarification. Hey, everybody uses this acronym. What does this mean? Some people are talking about this that happened 5 years ago. What is that about? So really sort of getting those clarifications along the journey. We have our work plan, we have our scope, but along the way, I'm always going to test theories. I'm always going to ask for clarification, and I'm always going to ask for, what makes sense for y'all. This is an approach. This is a step by step of how it could work vis-a-vis an intervention. Um, but if y'all don't even have a project management system, maybe we need to come up with an alternative to how you are going to be able to track and measure the outcomes of this intervention. So that collaboration is important. And then the other thing is really this idea of sustainability. We are not, while I would love to stay and work with you as long as you want me to, my idea for really creating sustainable change for an organization is to really hand the the implementation and the long-term work back to the organization. And so again, creating interventions with technology, capabilities, size of the organization, size of teams in mind, so that we're not overwhelming you with a whole nother process. As I like to say, folks got their day jobs, we got our unpaid jobs, these are friends, family, our own personal journeys. So we want to make sure that it's integrated and a part of the work that you're doing. And that happens by working collaboratively with our clients and not coming in with, oh, here, this worked at Home Depot. It should work for you too. No, we want to really talk about what the intervention is, what the solution is, and work with you to customize and integrate it into your ecosystem.
Yeah. So it's not just providing direction and strategy, but actually leading people through this organizational change, teaching them how to fish, not giving them a fish, right? Not giving them a solution, but allowing them to understand the solution so they can carry that initiative forward themselves for the sustainability side of things.
Absolutely. Well said. Love that.
Could you share
Thank you.
could you share a story with us of a client engagement and where they were starting, what some of their challenges were, and how you led them through this process to achieve sustainable change?
Yeah. Absolutely. So one of my favorite projects is a client. They're basically a think tank. They've been around for a while, and they were experiencing a tremendous amount of growth. They had been awarded a pretty massive grant, like in the millions, that was going to essentially double their workforce to be able to really focus on a very specific piece of change that would affect the US food system. It was such a fascinating project. Literally, they were a founder led organization. The original founder had just transitioned and they had a new leader. And if you know anything about founder led organizations, there's a lot of dynamics and culture, and it can feel kind of mom and pop shop, sort of single owner. And they were really exploding into a more structured organization. So we came in and tried to really help them. And I think we did a good job because they're still, thriving, and connect with them regularly. Create a structure for doubling their workforce. The other big sort of icky, sticky component, not icky, but more sticky and complex, was a lot of the work that they were doing was really looking at health equity issues. This new grant was really supporting them in doing that. The organization was pretty homogenous, a lot of white folks. So again, they're going to increase their workforce. They're bringing on a whole new team of folks to look at issues in health equity. They're diversifying their workforce. So we really help them look at their structure. We help them look at their equity and inclusion systems and what that looked like. And so it ended up being a multi-year project. We conducted surveys, focus groups, interviews. We formed a task to help look at how we would implement some of the, especially on the inclusion and equity side, some of that work. We really helped them think about their leadership. Was their leadership ready to lead a multicultural workforce? Was their leadership ready to lead a much larger workforce? So we help them sort of create that structure. We help them create some support vis-a-vis coaching and training and development for their leadership team, to really set them on the path to navigate this new phase of their organizational journey and this new line of work along their organizational journey. So, like I said, it's a multi-year project. We did a lot of work with their leadership team, their CEO, the new leader, the existing executive team, and then a lot of work with the task force to really help them create sustainable change.
Yeah, talk about a full organizational overhaul, right? Well,
Oh,
not turnover entirely, right? But actually just a complete change in dynamic and paradigm of how it
yeah.
is they work, what they do, and how they're going to move forwards with more clarity, more confidence, and everything needed for that sustainable change, right?
Absolutely. And the conversations. I mean, when you're talking about health equity issues in an organization that hasn't traditionally had those conversations, there was a
Mm,
lot of education and awareness that had to happen. That's not work that we do, but we have partners that we recommend. Sometimes just a basic understanding of, whoa, why are there health inequities in America? Like, what's been happening in our world? You know what I mean? If that's not a line of interest and awareness that you pursue organically,
mhm.
then what makes sense for us as an organization to bring the members of our workforce along as we now start to traverse this space?
Mm,
good intentions aren't good enough, right? You've got to really back that up with education, understanding, and awareness, and a curiosity of, oh, what is this? Oh, I've never heard this. This doesn't impact my world. Here's a resource. Let me learn more. So yeah,
definitely.
it really changed the whole culture and dynamic of that organization. I was so excited that my team and I were a part of that journey.
Amazing. So, Swafia, what you do at Brighter Strategies is you help businesses grow and go through these shifts so they can sustain growth themselves, right?
Mhm.
When we're looking at growth as the topic of conversation with Brighter Strategies in mind, I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you're doing for intentional growth as well, right? One of the leading efforts of growth and most impactful is client acquisition, but it's become more and more difficult in today's market for so many different reasons.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about how Brighter Strategies is pursuing growth through client acquisition so you can continue to impact your clients in such a profound way.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is a great story for us too, because the irony is, there's three of us that we have our CEO and founder, and then there's two, myself and my other colleague. We are the executive team. We lead this organization, and we have all historically really relied on our networks. So it's always a network, word of mouth, oh, somebody knows me, they called me. That's been our journey. But about 3 or 4 years ago, we were like, hey, we give our clients a lot of advice about being systemic and using data and analytics. Like maybe we should maybe we should kind of take our own advice. So we engaged with a market strategy company. They came in, they did what we do. They did a lot of interviews, they did a lot of surveying, they spoke to some of our clients, they did their own market research, and they presented us with a strategic marketing and business development plan that yours truly, yes, Steve, is championing as the lead. Obviously I work with all my colleagues, and I have a couple of really, 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 really great subject matter experts that help us. We had to develop our own plan, and we had to action our plan as a leadership team to your point, David, really sort of transform the way that we've been doing sales acquisition, client acquisition, and business development. And that
Mhm.
meant taking our very robust CRM that we were using basically as a Honda, but really as a Cadillac, and really sort of relying on the analytics within that system to really drive how we connect and surface leads and follow up with leads, marketing journeys. The leadership team, we are all sort of anti social media. I know this sounds really hilarious in 2026, but we are probably the three least active people on social media, but we really transformed ourselves in that way. I don't know if you're following us on LinkedIn, but we're hosting a lot of client conversations. We ourselves are putting out thought leadership content using videos, which, we all went kicking and screaming into the video world. I was like, whose idea was this? Oh, it was my idea. Okay, yeah, we're doing it. But we have really created, there's this word again, intentionality around how we are attracting clients, how we're nurturing those clients, and how we are moving from a lead to a conversion. And that's
Mm.
been a lot of education and awareness and understanding for us to move beyond just our network, which was
Mm.
sustaining us. But as we started to grow and our team started to grow, that pipeline, to your point, I think you alluded to earlier, needs to be rich and flowing for us to continue to grow and scale ourselves as an organization.
Absolutely. And this is an excellent shift that you guys have made, right? Many successful consultancies have been grown on successful relationships and referrals and reputation. People used to knock on the door and people used to be calling much more frequently. But in today's age, right, we need a much more robust digital presence, right, to create that more awareness, that broader top of funnel, we could call it. So I love what you're doing with, shifting and focusing on social media, especially, right? Because people can start to see who you are, how you speak, what you stand for, and you can
Mhm.
almost create that relationship or that foundational relationship in a way before they even come in for the first conversation. So it's extremely powerful. And on the other side of it, I mean, content marketing as well, it's become more difficult than ever, right? With AI making it
Mhm.
easy for everyone to create content. A lot of it looks and sounds and feels the same. It
Mhm.
is necessary though, right? When we're looking at how your client acquisition has evolved and the new efforts that you're leading, what are some of perhaps the biggest challenges that you're observing that the market is up against that you're tackling now internally?
The reality, really, David, especially in the US market, is just the uncertainty. resources are constrained. People are mindful of those resources. And so the biggest thing is being able to find that sweet spot of number one, volume, that pipeline. So making sure that more people know they need help and they're reaching out to get the help that they need. And then the budgets. There's so much uncertainty that people are very conservative right now in their professional and personal spending, frankly. So the real challenge for us is being able to really decipher, and we're doing a lot of research and conversations with clients about what are the real problems? What are people trying to solve today? What's keeping people up at night? Looking at the trends in the market, looking at the data that's coming out from various different industries and sectors in terms of issues that are on the horizon. What of those issues align with the services that Brighter Strategies provide, and getting the messaging to those clients vis-a-vis whether it's through our thought leadership conversations that we're having, whether with clients online or through the videos or the blogs that we're posting. And then also, again, really sort of connecting into the different associations and industry sectors that we represent to listen and hear the things that they're saying that are important. So it's a delicate tightrope walk some days to really make sure that we are presenting the right messages in alignment with what we do. We're not going to start making up things that we don't do, that we just don't do that. We know where our passion is, we know where our strengths are, but really getting that messaging to the right folks and then getting those conversations to happen so that we can collaboratively create the right approach with the right budget to solve the problem that the
Mm.
client is having.
Definitely, yeah. The state of the market, exactly as you said, with uncertainty around economics and politics and everything else, creates a huge problem. But where you'll find the most success, and already with what you're doing, where the audience will be able to find the most success in today's world is by trying to bridge that trust gap, right? Because it's a lack of trust that leaves potential leads and companies hesitant to invest. Right? They want to know that what they're investing is going to get them the right result. And a good way to start bridging that trust gap is by putting out materials, right? Whether it's videos that are perfectly aligned with the value that you provide, whether it's blog posts, whether it's additional resources to educate, to start to
Mm-hmm.
show people that you're willing to give before you're trying to get at the end of the day, right? And that's where most marketing falls short today, is that people are just asking without first providing value. So it's bridging that gap of trust by providing as much value as you can, ultimately to entice people into conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a host of, if you visit brighterstrategies.com, we have a host of ebooks and downloads on our website that you're right. Like to me, I think the real magic happens when and the real growth happens and this is where we like to work with purpose-driven organizations when share. You know what I'm saying? Like I think there's so many things, there's so many starting points that give a small organization or a growing organization that might be somewhat resource constrained this quarter, give them a starting point, give them some tools. So whether it's our change management downloadable, whether it's you're interviewing some folks, we've got a wonderful behavioral interview checklist of great interview starter questions that's on our website that you can download. So you're right. I love the idea of giving that aligns with our values as a company. And so we've got a ton of resources on our website. I'm like, read this Harvard Business Review article. I read this article and it said this. Check it out. It's linked in my blog. Like, I just love that. I think, one of our values is learning is lifelong. And we like to extend that beyond just our internal company. And sometimes I feel like, okay, tell me if I'm sending you too much stuff, but if something comes across my desk and reminds me of a project I worked on with you, I'm like, David, look, I just read this article. Check it out. You know, that's just kind of who we are as a company and who I am as a human.
Mm.
So love to share. Love it.
Absolutely. A lot of what you're doing right now, and a lot of what all consultancies should be doing, is focusing on higher output, greater output, without sacrificing or compromising the value. But through that shift, there's challenges that arise, right? Potentially distracting yourself from or pulling yourself away from really focusing on your client through that phase as well, and delivering true impact. But we have an additional tool or strategy available today to make these things easier, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's creating content, whether it is, implementing processes and systems that free up time so that you can focus on clients. And, that tool is AI, of course, right? So we're in an extremely privileged and blessed position today where we have additional technologies to help with that next phase of growth. So, Swafia, when we're looking at where AI starts to come into play to support your growth strategy, tell us a little bit more about what that looks like.
Yeah, it's so funny that you say you call it a privilege because I view it in the same way because I can remember, okay, I'm kind of dating myself. But you couldn't get anything unless you went to a conference or a workshop. Like there was no Google entered the workforce a long time ago. But yeah, so how AI has really shifted for us is, you know, we've used it in a couple different key ways. First and foremost, back in the day, when we first would sort of have meetings with clients or even interview clients as part of a engagement, we always had like a note taker. So there would be like maybe I'm facilitating an interview, I have somebody note taking for me, or I'm in a sort of pitch call and I'm looking like this the whole time because I'm typing. My typing's not that great. So I'm not necessarily watching for visible cues that are happening in a conversation, or if you've got a bunch of folks on a screen, like I miss the fact that the person up in the corner is rolling their eyes based on what somebody else said. I'm like, ooh, this is probably not really what's going on here. I should probe a little bit more. So we have some tools that we use that help us with that note taking, right? So now I can interview someone. It's a little less costly for the client too, with a note taker, an AI note taker that automatically organizes the script. Like the transcript is there. I don't have to go through and do it myself or be like, oh, I misspelled that. Let me fix it. That's my typing is a little wonky. But yeah, there are these really great tools that are available to us that make us more efficient, that make me personally more present. Because again, I am listening to you, I'm talking to you, I'm watching you. I'm not looking down at my keyboard or struggling to remember what you said or did they say that or did I say that? Right? It's my bias isn't influencing my note taking because it's all being transcribed.
Mm.
So that's one of the key ways that I feel like has allowed me to be more present. And when we're talking about a transcript, it's a raw transcript, and my bias, because I have them, has not influenced the note taking. So that's a pretty big resource for us as a company.
It's an incredible resource for efficiency, right?
Oh,
When we're looking at efficiency, you only want to get so efficient before it starts to compromise perhaps the integrity of the work that's being conducted. Maybe not on
mhm.
the accuracy side of things, but especially within consulting and within organizational development, it's that relationship building, it's the empathy, right? It's that personal connection that actually builds trust, which is essential for effective change management. So when we're looking at perhaps, the greatest risks or that line that shouldn't be crossed when it comes to technology and efficiency and AI and, not negatively impacting
Mhm.
the change and the trust you want to build and the change you want to lead. Where do you think it starts to become risky or compromising? Where is that line that shouldn't be crossed?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, in the work that we're doing with change and culture and people, you need that critical lens, right? Like, we know that again, and we're learning too. We're learning and growing, and we recently engaged an AI trainer to help us sort of, think about how we navigate all these various technologies and staying on the ethical side of things. But really looking at the data. Am I analyzing and interpreting the data, or am I just letting the AI do it? Right. So again, I don't know, this is where I get a little like, I don't know all the ins and outs of AI, but for me, when I'm analyzing a series of especially qualitative data, quantitative is a little obviously more straightforward. It's numbers and averages and all that good stuff. So that's a little easier. But when we talk about qualitative data, where you have interviewed someone or you've had a conversation or you're unpacking a conversation, a more focus group or insights across a host of people, it's how are we coding those? How are we sort of creating the themes? And then what do those themes mean? And again, that comes from, years and years and years of business psychology research. And, what does it mean when people are saying, yeah, I can't make a mistake in this organization. That's a lack of safety. That's directly impacting your culture. That's directly impacting the ability for people within your organization to learn and grow. If you can't make a mistake, how do you learn? You just keep doing the same thing over and over. If you don't, somebody didn't say, "Hey, time out. That's not. There's a better way to do this, or there's a newer way to do this, or hey, that's actually not the way that should be done. It's being it's not being done correctly. Let's talk
Mm-hmm.
about the right way to do it." But if I am so afraid to say, I think I made a mistake, I'm afraid to ask a question. what does that mean? So the ability to have a critical thinking lens and to know what that translates to from an organizational intervention perspective. So now I know people are afraid to make mistakes and ask questions. What is the correct intervention to create the psychological safety that's needed in this organization for people to grow and thrive and develop professionally?
Mhm.
I'm not getting 100% of Swafia if she's not going to raise her hand and ask a question because David's going to bite her head off. You know what I'm saying? So again, it's sort of, I think the delicate balance for us with AI is who's interpreting the information that's being organized by this system, and what do we do with that? What's the right solution? Is it my solution that's based on my double-digit years of, you know, professional learning, educational background, or is it something that sounds interesting, but it's not real? You know, you can kind of start to see where if you're thinking about things critically and you're looking at output, that's just a bunch of words. There's no real solution there. There's no real understanding of what the issue is. And so I do think we need that critical thinking lens. We need that analysis on the information that's being organized, that we're using our technology tools to organize to be able to really come up with the right solution for the client or whoever you're working for.
Swafia, your story covers purpose-driven work, strategic adaptation, and a deep commitment to people within organizations.
Mhm.
For the listeners out there who are navigating their own growth shift, what's the single most important piece of advice that you would leave them with about aligning their passions with profit and building a sustainable business?
So this that was another sort of pivotal moment for me, you know, sort of leaving the comfortable law firm corporate environment where, you know, you were getting your salary, you're getting your raise, you're getting all this good stuff. You didn't really have to think about where the work was coming from. It was a natural stream of work. But that purpose, what who are you? What is your passion? What excites you? What wakes you up in the morning? What is the work that you want to do? And how do you find that? How do you find your passion and your purpose and then find a way to make money at it? You know, and that's basically what I would tell anyone, you know, as you explore your career, as you explore your life journey. To me, they're somewhat intertwined, and that's a whole sorry, a whole nother podcast. But you know, along my journey, I've done stuff. I've, you know, taken classes as a yoga teacher. I've done you know, I've done different things and try to create some synergies and symmetry with my professional. So again, it's really, as I said, learning is lifelong. It's one of my personal values. It's also a value here at Brighter Strategies. I taken like so many classes, got so many certifications, MBTI, strength development inventory, psychological safety. Like I am like a certification junkie because I'm really it's fun to me, right? So what is your passion? What are the things that excite you? I love to read, as you can maybe see from the books behind me. So what are the things that sort of drive you? And just there is, and I gotta believe, like even more so in this sort of social media world that we live in, which is what we see with a lot of these influencers, even if it's food, go to all these restaurants, take pictures of your meals, give a critique. Like there's so many ways nowadays with the advancements in technology for people to really live their passion. So I would say explore, have fun, take classes, you know, go wild, and just sort of be true to yourself and your spirit. And I think that kind of puts people on the right path, whether it's personally or professionally.
Mm.
And just don't be afraid. I mean, I think I spent maybe the first, you know, 10 to 15 years of my professional career really sort of mindful and walking the corporate line, and don't speak unless you have something very profound and important to say, or you've got the right solution. You know, I would say, you know, just be bold, be thoughtful, and, you know, really sort of work on your ethos, work on your craft, work on whatever your area of expertise is or you think you're passionate about. Just learn as much as you can about it and then make it your own. Make it you.
Swafia, thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights with the audience today. For any listeners who might like to learn more about Brighter Strategies or who might even like to just connect with you to continue the conversation, what would be the best way to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. We're on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, brighterstrategies.com. You can email me at swafia at brighterstrategies.com. Would love to connect with you in a virtual coffee or conversation. So just reach out and we'll be happy to connect.
Swafia, thanks again for joining us today on The Growth Shift.
Thank you, David. This was so much fun. I appreciate you.
Another powerful conversation on The Growth Shift. If you, like our guests, are ready to turn your expertise into a predictable, scalable growth engine, one that eliminates the grind of prospecting and enhances your high-value relationships, then it's time to connect with Valentix. We are not a marketing agency. We are your strategic growth partner, building intelligent systems that ensure your client acquisition is predictable, not dependent on chance. To see how our AI-powered frameworks can free up your time and fill your calendar with decision makers, visit valentix.io. Thank you for joining us on The Growth Shift. We'll see you next time.